without further ado, I'd love to introduce you all to Brad. I got to meet him up here in Washington. So he was a dive instructor here in the area in Seattle, well, the greater Seattle area, and took our first year of Reef Check Washington training. So he was one of our very first volunteers here. Had been going back and forth to Hawaii a little bit over that time, and about a year ago moved there full time to do other dive instructing and guiding in slightly warmer waters. And in last spring was inspired to see if we could reintroduce the Reef Check Hawai'i program and fully launch that in October. And I don't want to take any of your steam, Brad. So at this point, I will hand things over to you to talk more about how all that came about.
All right, well, thank you, Jackie. And hey, everybody, aloha. And I'm very excited to be on here today talking with you all. I'm just going to open up a PowerPoint here and we'll just kind of get going through it. Looking forward to answering any questions you have at the end and all that. So. And Jackie, if you could just let me know, make sure that this is popping up here.
Yeah, that looks great.
Okay.
There's a little box that says Zoom sharing your screen. Can you hide? Yeah, perfect.
Oh, this technology world. Okay. So hey everybody, I'm Brad, and I am the program coordinator here at Reef Check Hawai'i. And I think I'll just kind of talk briefly about what we're going to cover today. We'll talk a little bit about the Hawaiian Islands. What is coral and why is it important to us? We're going to talk a little bit about Reef Check Hawaii's protocol and our goals and projects here with the program, and then how you all can get involved. So a little bit about Hawaii. As most of you know, there's like 8 main volcanic islands here. The Big Island of Hawaii, which is where I live, on the Kona coast, which is on the west side of the island. We also have the county of Maui, which includes Maui, Molokai, Lanai, and Koholave. Also Oahu, and then Kauai and Niihau. So these are kind of like the newer islands in the greater archipelago. We do have a whole bunch of islands and atolls that maybe not all of us know about, and it's part of the Papahānaumokuākea Marine National Monument, which includes dozens of tiny little islands, atolls, and shoals spanning approximately 1,200 nautical miles. So we're kind of thinking like for the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, think like Boston, Massachusetts, all the way to the Florida Everglades. Quite an expansive area there. The total chain is about 1,563 miles from the east coast of the Big Island of Hawaii all the way to Kure Atoll. In the main Hawaiian Islands, Niihau is the oldest of all of the islands, about 5.6 million years old, while Hawaii here is actually literally forming new land as we speak. One of our volcanoes has been erupting over the past couple weeks. As Jackie alluded to earlier, it is slightly warmer here, diving temperature-wise, with our mean sea surface temperatures ranging from 73.6 to 77.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Nearshore ecosystem is influenced heavily by its exposure to large open swells and strong trade winds, us being located literally in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. There's about 410,000 acres of living reef just in the main Hawaiian Islands, which is actually larger than all of the land in Oahu. There's more than 7,000 known species of marine plants and animals here, 500 plus species of just marine algae. And excluding Johnston Atoll, which is a little bit south of here, the Hawaiian islands is over 1,000 miles away from the next closest landmass. And because of that, our isolation has created this just very large percentage of endemic species or species of marine life that are only found here in Hawaii. These endemic species, basically like 1 in every 4 fish species are found only here, like this Hawaiian cleaner wrasse. Though many of our species have close relatives elsewhere. As our island chains were forming, a lot of plankton drifted over. A lot of larval state critters came across and continue to come across from other parts of the world, drifting, like this little blenny here. This guy will be eating coral someday if it makes it all the way across. Saw this on one of our blackwater dives. It's riding inside a large pelagic tunicate called a sulp, which if you've dove in Monterey, so as some of you have, you might have seen some of those before. But anyways, a lot of these critters come across, they come into our coastal lands here and they make homes. And some of those are able to make it all the way across, like a Moorish idol. But others, like a clownfish, as unlike the movie Finding Nemo would say, the clownfish can't actually survive long enough to drift across from Australia or the Coral Triangle to get all the way over here. So we don't have clownfish, although we do have a lot of different critters from that Indonesia and Australia and Coral Triangle area. So what's important about like this marine biodiversity is that like large numbers are providing redundancy, and that allows the ecosystem to adapt to change. If we only had like certain critters that serve certain roles in our reefs, the whole ecosystem would fail. It's kind of like if you had like a bunch of nails in the frame of your house, and some of those nails come out. Eventually, the whole like house is going to collapse, right? So we need all these little parts working together, holding it up and keeping it going. Speaking of little critters, why is coral reef important, and what is it? So coral is an animal related to sea anemones. Here's a little close-up shot here, and you can see these tiny little guys. The reef builders, like this lobe coral here, are hard corals, which are colonial, and they can be hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years old, with millions and millions of these little individual polyps all living on this rock, and then they're secreting calcium carbonate to build more rock and actually build our reef system. They reproduce through broadcast spawning, and their tentacles, they all have tentacles with stinging cells or nematocysts that they use to capture prey, similar to anemones. But not all their food comes from what their tentacles capture. And in fact, inside each coral polyp in their digestive tract, there's a single-celled algae called zooxanthellae that lives inside there, and it photosynthesizes, providing food and oxygen used by the coral polyp itself. In fact, the zooxanthellae actually produces more oxygen than the coral polyp can use, and so that excess oxygen actually diffuses out into the ocean itself. The food actually consists of up to 80% of the coral polyps. Food comes from that zooxanthellae. It's a very important relationship. Now, hard corals build our reef systems, and why is it important? Well, they provide nursery grounds to 25% of known marine species and are home to roughly 1 in 3 fish species. This is globally. They support filter feeders like sponges that filter out toxins and contaminants from the ocean, and are home to plant life that releases oxygen and absorbs carbon dioxide. Coral reefs provide food for coastal and inland communities, and over half of all U.S. fisheries species depend on coral reefs for a portion of their life cycle. NOAA estimates the commercial value of U.S. fisheries to be over $100 million. Coral reefs act as barriers for coastlines that absorb wave energy and reduce land erosion. And according to a U.S. Geographical Survey done just a few years ago, a reduction of 1 meter in coral reef height here in Hawaii would increase the 100-year floodplain by 33 square kilometers. And that create a $1.3 billion economic impact. The benefits of the world's largest industry, tourism. Billions of dollars are generated through diving tours, recreational fishing trips, hotels, restaurants, and other businesses located near coral reefs. And then there's other benefits like health. There's lots of biomedical compounds, bone replacement therapy comes from coral reefs. And then there's possible cures for cancer, bacterial infections, viruses, and other diseases. So that's a little bit about CoralNet. I'm sure you might have some questions of that as we get going here at the end of this, but we'll talk a little bit about Reef Check Hawai'i, the protocol, and a little bit of history about Reef Check itself. So a little background. So basically, Reef Check, as most of us know, takes on the important conservation task of long-term monitoring of coral reefs and kelp forests. The first global survey was conducted in 1997, and there were 385 surveys completed in 32 countries and territories. To date, Reef Check has conducted over 16,000 surveys in 102 countries and territories. The data collected is used by governmental agencies, non-governmental organizations, researchers, scientists, managers to make informed decisions. And kind of cool to be out here in Hawaii, but the first ever Reef Check survey was conducted on the island of Kauai, here in the main Hawaiian Islands. And up until this past year, we had completed 114 surveys here in Hawaii. So as we're going out doing these surveys, we're taking a look at what we're monitoring here. And so we want to measure human impacts. We want to make sure that it's ease of identification. There's a demand for the organisms, a broad distribution of them. Our protocols are standardized globally. And while we have like some specific fish and invertebrates that we count here, globally our data is comparable, whether it's here or data in the Caribbean or data in the Red Sea. So it's kind of this like global standard that we're using. There's the ecological importance of the species, and then can we fix it? If there's problems, like is there something that we can look at and fix? So how our surveys work in the coral program is we roll out these 100-meter transect tapes. And in there, we have 4 20-meter replicate transects that we're monitoring. We're counting fish and invertebrates in 5-meter wide by 5-meter tall by 5-meter out space, or basically for that 20 meters. And then we're recording every half meter the substrate. And then we're taking an overall observation of the impacts on the reef. So some of our fish that we're studying or that we are counting are like surgeonfish, like this yellow tang here. The reason we count the yellow tang is it's an important part of the aquarium trade. So we want to monitor the fish density of those. Butterfly fish, super important on the reef. Many of them actually feed on coral polyps themselves, also part of the aquarium trade. Jacks can be an indicator of overfishing, and they are low-level carnivores on the reef. Snappers are also a part of that overfishing management. We do have this fish out here called the blue-striped snapper, and the reason we don't include those with our snappers is because they're actually an invasive species. They were brought over here from Indonesia to help create a little bit more of a sustainable fishery. They're pretty hardy fish, reproduce pretty easily. Only problem is they don't taste good. So nobody eats them and no one fishes for them. So we do have a little bit of overpopulation with these guys. We also count parrotfish, and they're one of the critters that we do size bin. So we count paired fish that are over 20 centimeters. And their role on the reef is actually super important. So they're herbivores and they go around and will like scrape off algae on the reef. And that algae is competing with new coral that's like landing from the broadcast spawning and trying to colonize. And so they're creating space on the reef by scraping off the algae and eating that. Yellowfin goatfish, like these guys here, are also part of, are also an indicator of overfishing. Moray eels, another low-level carnivore on the reef. And we count orange spine unicorn fish, super important in the aquarium trade. We have one more low-level carnivore that in many parts of the world is counted as like an overfishing thing. But for us here, they have very high levels of ciguatera, which is a toxin. It's something that cannot be cooked out of the meat, and so, or chilled out of the meat. And so it makes us very ill when we eat it. So it's more of a sport fish here, but an invasive species that was introduced to our islands. So that's why we'll monitor those guys. But that's it for the fish. Peacock groupers are over 30 centimeters. We count them. They're the other size bin. Everything else we just count based on their present. We have a bunch of invertebrates like this diadema here, which we actually kind of like our urchins out here for the most part. Again, they're kind of cleaning space off, cleaning up some algae and creating space on the reef. They're also harvested. Some of them are harvested. Banded coral shrimp is one of our invertebrates. Aquarium trade. Cowrie is part of the curio or like gift shop trade, and so they're definitely something important for us to be counting. A wide variety of urchins, like this collector urchin here. We count lobster, part of the overfishing indication. The trumpet tritons snail, which is kind of cryptic in this photo, but that's what they look like a lot of the time, kind of right there in the middle of the picture. But these guys actually are a predator of the crown of thorn sea star. And these guys can wipe out coral super quick. They're a natural part of our environment here. And we aren't currently seeing, to my knowledge, any overpopulation, but from time to time there are booms of these. Fortunately, because we do have the Triton's trumpet and as a predator that is around and in our environment, generally we aren't seeing a whole lot of overpopulation of crown of thorns, but crown of thorn sea stars are definitely one of the critters that we take a look at. And then we kind of move into the substrate category. So we have hard corals, which there's a wide variety of them. There's encrusting, there's branching like this antler coral here, and then there's mounding. But all these hard corals are basically building structure on our reef. We also count soft corals, including zoanthids like this here. There's a wide variety of nutrient indicator algae that we're also counting. And when we talk about nutrient indicator algae, we're actually looking at like blooms of this. So from time to time, we'll just see like a massive amount of algae kind of covering a portion of the reef, which is interesting and sometimes a little disappointing. But we take a look and see what can be creating that that challenge on the reef. Again, algae is competing with coral on the reef. Okay, if Dan's on the phone, Dan, don't look at the nudibranch. But everyone else, take a quick peek at the nudibranch. But then also on the left-hand side, there's a sponge here. Sponges are super important for us to count. Oftentimes they're indicators of like sewage. One of the challenges we have here in Hawaii is there's a lot of cesspool and like septic systems. And so just in general, sponges are filter feeders and they can be an indicator of sewage and other toxins being present in the environment. Another thing we take a look at is recently killed coral. And what you'll notice as we go through maybe a couple of these slides here. So this coral here, well, it looks like it's bleached because it's white. It's actually not bleached. This was just broken off, had been tumbling around, was broken off by in a storm, and that it has been just tumbling around, unable to get sunlight consistently for the zooxanthellae to photosynthesize, and so it died off. We count rock. Rock's super important because that's what coral initially grows on. Rubble we also count. A lot of times as broken fragments of coral and other pieces of rock, but rubble we actually the challenge with rubble is while coral can like initially land on it and start to colonize, it can't actually survive long enough because it just gets tossed around. So coral lands on rubble doesn't do anything. We do have some silt. This might look like some visibility at some dive sites you guys might have seen before. But anyways, a little bit of silt covers up rock, covers up the coral. And if there is silt on the reef, that means sunlight's not getting down to that zooxanthellae algae, or it's covering reef and competing with the coral that's trying to colonize. And then, of course, there is sand. And lastly, of course, there are some other things that are down there that, while they do serve a purpose on the reef, they aren't something that we are going to count, like these hydroids here. So that falls into the other categories. There are a bunch of impacts that we kind of take a look at throughout here. There's coral damage, whether it's human or predation. This here is predation from a crown of thorn sea star. It's gone over the top. That's the mark that it leaves there. Basically just eating all the coral polyps in its way. Once the coral polyp's gone, there's no zooxanthellae, which provides the color, and that's why it leaves this white mark there. Of course, there's trash on the reefs. There's coral bleaching, which is something that we take a look at. There's been globally, there was a pretty significant coral bleaching event this past year. However, Hawaii itself has not really been hit hard by it, which has been fortunate. And basically what happens with coral bleaching is ocean temperatures have risen. And so that algae that is so important, providing up to 80% of the coral polyp's food, can't survive inside the coral polyp anymore. And so it releases out. And then what happens is, because that algae is no longer there, the coral will actually look bleached, like completely white. Okay. But then this white, like coral, the coral polyps are still there. So now they're fighting and trying to, survive long enough just by the plankton that's floating by, or itty bitty little critters floating by, trying to eat that, replenish as much as they can. But they're pretty stressed at this point. And hopefully what happens is that the ocean temperatures drop back down to a normal level in time for the zooxanthellae to assimilate back in with the coral polyps, and it can go back to surviving. But if the ocean temperatures are sustained for too long a period of time, the coral polyps themselves are going to die. So that's why if you are reading articles about coral bleaching and you hear like some are recovering in some areas and other areas they're just completely dying off, it's basically how sustained the ocean temperature rise is in that area. And then we also count a variety of diseases. Just so you know, this photo is not from a coral in Hawaii, but this is showing a black band or a white band disease. So on the far right side of it, you kind of see this brownish coral, and that is healthy with the zooxanthellae. You see a white band kind of right down the middle of it. That has been recently killed by the disease itself. It's spreading across the colony. And the kind of dark section to the bottom left corner is completely dead coral that's been killed by the disease. And so there are different diseases that we're monitoring: white band, black band, um, and a couple others. So a little bit about just Reef Check and our goals and projects here in Hawaii. And I'll tell you a little bit about what happened in 2024. So as Jackie alluded to earlier, we kind of got the program rolling in October. We initially started the conversations back in the spring, early summer, and launched it with in October with our first eco diver trainer training. Myself and two other people that I work with out here became eco diver trainers. And so we now are able to go out and train new eco divers and lead surveys. We completed 11 surveys along the Kona coast here on the Big Island of Hawaii. And we completed one eco diver course. So what's in store for 2025? Well, I'm in the process of publishing our 2024 annual report currently. Our goal is to complete 12 eco diver courses with 60 new eco divers trained. We're going to complete 80 surveys here on the Big Island of Hawaii, and then expand over to Maui with 20 surveys completed there. We're also beginning a dive into science type of program out here for local high schoolers. But basically, we're going to start taking a look at bringing juniors and seniors in high school from an open water certification all the way through dive master, plus becoming eco divers here with Reef Check. And we're working with local university to kind of help provide an opportunity for these local kids to launch into their scientific diving program or have all the prerequisites met. Also, too, gives them an option if they're not looking for furthering their education through the traditional universities to have a trade that they can walk into. So, as a dive master. So really excited about that. And then we're also in the process of creating eco diver e-learning so that some of the talking, like you guys get to hear today, some of that can just be done and as like a lot of scuba training is currently. And then past that, we're looking to branch out by 2027 will be across all, or 2026 will be across all of the main Hawaiian islands. And the goal is to be doing about 300 surveys a year across all the main Hawaiian islands. We don't really know if we're going to be surveying into the Northwest Hawaiian Islands. There's quite a bit of logistics with that, but also too, there's not a lot of population impact. So while it'd be really interesting to see what is happening out there and to be able to compare that information to like what's happening closer to populations, don't know if we're going to be seeing that here in the next couple of years. That kind of leads me to how you guys can all get involved. Like Adam and Rachel here, you can become an eco diver. Our next course is February 4th through 9th. It includes 3 academic sessions, which can be done via Zoom, or we can also do that in person. And then it is 6 training dives. You can also donate if you would like through adopting a reef, corporate sponsorships. You can donate a course if you would like to. And I think with that, I'd love to just open this up for questions to you guys. So thank you so much for listening to that. And I hope you have a bunch of questions. Love to answer them for you.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Brad. That was super interesting. I love all the photos, and I can't imagine why you left Washington for those waters.
It's tough.
But we do have a few questions that rolled through the chat. Sophia was asking what kind of site management do you implement into sites after survey/data collection? And I don't know if we need a follow-up to that, but I think it's like maybe what sort of management comes out of the data, if that sounds right.
Yeah. So basically, so like with any information, um, we've collected this year. So we've collected 100. We've done 114 surveys. Our surveys, as I'm sure you're probably aware, are most important when we're stacked year over year over year over year, and the long term the long term monitoring starts to come into play. So our data will be much more relevant next year when we're looking at 2 years in comparison. For management, it goes into the Reef Check global database. Lots of organizations globally use that. I've had conversations with local government agencies and fishery managers as well out here. And so we're looking to partner with them as best we can and share our data so that they can make informed decisions.
There's some questions about getting involved. So one, do you have trainings other than the one in February planned? And if there are folks who are already reef checking in other regions, is there any difference in the training there?
Mm-hmm.
And I think they mean temperate reef checking and not other corals. Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So I think to start with the latter part of it, or the first part of it, we'll have more trainings opening up as we go, and I'll make those available on the Reef Check website as we kind of get the logistics figured out for that. But currently, our next one scheduled in February, but our plan is to do one a month. As it pertains to like the kelp forest, the protocol is significantly different, and while you're comfortable like handling a slate, and probably the fish and inverts would come relatively quick for most of our temperate zones. There's a significant difference in the substrate, and even pretty experienced divers out here, it takes a little bit of time. So I'd say we were still probably around that similar type of training schedule.
And did you say if there were other ones in February?
Yeah, not currently
Okay.
set up.
Right.
But we'll do one a month. So there'll be one in March and April and May. Like they'll be
great.
Yeah.
Oh, so I was wondering, Carter is asking, do you identify corals to species or just like hard versus soft? And what's the reasoning for one or the other?
Yeah, good question. So we just designate between hard and soft. And the reason being is for its role on the reef. We're not digging into this like super deep, all of the super deep scientific information that maybe some scientists might want to look at. What we're trying to do is provide valuable information for our like managers, and so all of our hard corals, while there's a variety of species, they're all serving the same purpose of building up our reefs, providing habitat for our fish and invertebrates, protecting us from erosion, from storms and that. So
yeah, I had a question kind of along a similar line, so maybe I'll throw it in there. Is there how or is water temperature monitored anyway throughout the year?
I would love to do that. So let's
But
make
like
that happen.
no one already does that out there. There's no like NOAA group or something that
There are there's not a lot of consistent monitoring. I think maybe I should just leave it at that.
Yeah.
There's like lots of I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Adam, a man after our own heart, wants to know if there's a map of your survey sites.
Yeah, there will be in our annual report. So
Great. And do you have a way that you select sites?
Yeah, there's a few different factors. One is like accessibility. And actually, a lot of times we look for access that's or like areas that are around like where fresh water is mixing in, and like rivers and streams and stuff, which are super easy to take a look at on like the continental United States. But here in Hawaii, especially on the Big Island, a lot of our fresh water actually flows through aquifers or lava tubes like underwater. So there aren't like as many rivers that we notice it coming through. So, just understanding where those are, population centers, and, what is on land that could be impacting the reefs. And then let's go survey the reefs themselves that are out there.
Which at this point might be a good time to share how many you have planned to
Yeah.
survey.
Sure. So we will do 100 surveys in 2025. So we'll do 80 on the Big Island and 20 on Maui is our plan. If we can get more in, we will, but that is what our goal is. So a pretty aggressive number, and we definitely could use some volunteers. So we'd love to come out and enjoy some 76 to 82 degree water. I'd love to have you.
Sounds nice in February.
Yeah.
Trina was wondering, two questions. Is there any volunteer work that freedivers can help with? And does Reef Check ever partner to participate in coral gardening work?
That's both two good questions. So there is an opportunity to do some snorkeling. I guess we could say free dive, but I would probably, I'd probably say think of it more of like snorkeling, where we'll do surveys in super shallow water at some important sites. So we do have opportunities for that. And then what was the second part of that question, Jackie? I'm sorry.
Do you ever participate in coral gardening or partner with?
We do not. There are some like restoration projects that are happening currently on the island, but there is other parts of the world that maybe have different management structure for their marine environments. Reef Check does support and work with that. I know like in Malaysia, they're working on doing some restoration potentially, and there are parts that get heavily involved in the management. That's not something that is necessarily going to happen here in Hawaii, just on the overall management, because we do have such large government influence here. And when it comes to the coral gardening or restoration, maybe.
Yeah, it's not how things are like coral restoration isn't part of that management plan at the moment, it sounds like.
Yeah. And for us, like where we can contribute and be most effective is to go out and do the challenge of long-term monitoring. Like that's our purpose. And so.
Oh, this is a fun one because everyone likes charismatic megafauna. Do you count any or note any of those species, things like turtles?
Yeah, actually. So there are some megafauna that we count. They don't have to be on transect, which is thankful. I've seen a couple tiger sharks on our surveys, so that's kind of fun. But we do count sharks, dolphins, and rays as well as turtles.
As like presence absence.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. Just total count, but does not have to be on transect.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Great. Are there MPAs in Hawaii?
There's a lot of different structure to how our waterways are protected. So there are some, the MPA, that whole Northwest Hawaiian Islands is a national monument. There are like various protected areas where they're like, but there's a lot of like fluctuation. Like some are like non-fishing, some are non-fishing for certain species. It's like very convoluted.
Yeah. So it's maybe not the same as what folks might be familiar with in like California.
Yeah,
Um,
correct.
but they have maybe specific species or some things are protected.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're curious about how that's evaluated for effectiveness, but if it's not quite the same structure, then I'm not sure if that's
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, Dan kind of already answered this in the chat, but accounting for variation, like how do you account for variation in depth? And if
Yeah, so when we're running out our meter tape, we're basically within a meter of depth. It's like a consistent across the 100 meters. So and we kind of work in like basically 3 meters of water down to 12 meters of water is our max depth for a transect.
so kind of similar to if y'all are coming from a kelp forest monitoring background, a similar goal for staying within that 1 meter of our starting depth.
Yeah, and a lot of times that's kind of for a couple of reasons. Obviously, like safety, diver safety. It could be a long dive sometimes. Typically, it takes one dive with 4 to 6 divers to do all 4 transects. So we're very quick in that regard. But also too, we want to make sure that we're in an area that there's sunlight hitting the coral.
So I got a question, Brad, or
Yeah.
maybe more of a request. But if there are folks you who are kelp forest divers on the West Coast and want to come to Hawaii and go through the training and do some surveys over there, maybe just like describe a little bit like what that would look like. That they get a plane ticket, they fly somewhere, like just kind of walk us through that process.
Absolutely. So I think what would probably make the most sense for me is if we did all of this, like all of the academic sessions, like through Zoom, or like a video conference. I think that would be absolutely the easiest way to go through this process. I don't want you guys out here in beautiful Hawaii sitting in a classroom listening to me talk if you don't have to. So probably do all that stuff, have you come out, and then it's basically would be like 3 dives or 3 days of diving, 2 dives a day, where we're just going over the identification. The first 4 dives are basically we're out, myself or one of the other instructors would be out there, basically just like we're like literally pointing at stuff on the reef and you're telling us that you know what it is. So we go through that for 4 dives. There's 1 for fish. That'll come super easy for you guys, I promise you. Invertebrates will also be super easy for you. You're already accustomed to searching for critters. We don't have a wide variety of them. Pretty easy. But when it does come to the substrate, that takes a pretty significant portion of it. So we would do 2 dives, just identifying substrate, making sure you've got that nailed pat. And then once we got that, we're going to go off and we'll do 2 mock surveys, where we'll do a little bit, 2 dives that are mock surveys. We're just doing a little bit of each one, proving you can do it while we're watching you. And then I guess what I'd probably say would be super cool is we go out, we do a couple like days of surveys, and then we probably should go out and like hang out with some manta rays for fun. So that might be kind of how I would put something like that together. So think of it like 5 days. You need 24 hours before you fly out. So maybe make a 6-7 day trip, 5 days of diving, It'd be a blast. So, and what would be great is if there's a way that we could coordinate a time where a chunk of you could come out, because I think that we could be really efficient with our time. And I think that the training themselves and the training dives would go like pretty smooth and quick for you guys, since you're already familiar with riding on slates and counting stuff underwater. So it'd be great to just have a group of kelp forest divers out here.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then maybe
You
it can
just
just be
drummed
like
up
an
so
annual
much
thing.
interest. Yeah. You just drummed up so much interest in the chat right
Yeah, good.
now.
And like where is it located? Like where do folks stay and
Yeah.
fly to?
So we're in Kona, which is on the west coast of the Big Island of Hawaii. And just maybe a couple things that I just mentioned about that. So Hawaii, when I say Hawaii, I'm just talking about the Big Island. Yeah, Kailua Kona. So we have significant elevation change. We have mountains all over the place. Our largest volcanic mountain is 13,000 feet above sea level. And if you're staying on the Kona side, you would be going up thousands of feet to get over to like the east side of the island, over to Hilo, or to the north side of the island even. No matter which direction you go. So that does kind of put you in that same risk that flying would. So if you are doing this and you want to go see other parts of the island, I would probably recommend either extending a stay at the end of it for a few extra days, making sure you get that nice 18 to 24 hour interval that you want before you go to altitude, or do that at the beginning of the trip. It's kind of a cool island itself to explore. There's like 11 of the 13 ecological biomes. Biomes. There we go. Are found here on the Big Island. So there's a lot of people that come out here and do a lot of research on land as well. And the diving is crazy good, guys. Like it's crazy good. Like crazy good.
Well, that's awesome. You might even get me out there to dive in that warm water.
Yeah. Bring your 7 mil, Dan.
The only one I have.
Yeah. And we do like a combination of like shore diving and boat diving. So for this, I'd want to do as much boat diving as possible. It's the easiest access for us. So.
Right. There's some other like specific, I guess like training questions. Folks are interested in seeing a manual and want to know if that's available or if that's part of the course, like something to, I assume something to like look through protocols in.
Yeah, we have like 5 PowerPoints that I go through for the training itself. We have a species ID guide and all of that. And once you sign up, you get access to all that.
Oh yeah, so Melanie, for dates for future trainings, I think Brad had mentioned that they'll try to do a training once a month, and so I think maybe the best way is to reach out to Brad to figure out dates, and then you can build your travel plans around that. But Brad, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think right now in the next 2 weeks, maybe reach out to me and we should have it posted here by the end of January, our training dates for 2025.
You wouldn't want to come and leave surveys undone on the California coast.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Well, it's nice to schedule around the times that we're not needed to do surveys where we normally survey in the California coast or Washington, as the case may be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, coral's here year round, and I know kelp isn't. So, or many species of kelp isn't. So, for you guys, I would assume that you're probably looking like late October to like beginning of March or something like that, for these types of excursions.
And Melanie, I will give you and everyone else permission to miss some kelp forest surveys, to go to Hawaii and survey down there.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that.
Well, and I appreciate you thinking about, the kelp. So yeah.
Oh, do you see the February dates, or are those just for the online?
No, that's the full course.
Yeah.
That's the full course. So the February, 4th through 9th.
I'll leave us in a little bit of awkward silence as if anyone has any other questions.
The first 3 days are online, or would be the academic portion. So, and those will be 6 to 8 p.m. Hawaii time, which we're 2 hours behind you guys, or behind the West Coast.
Right. Well, Brad, thanks so much for sharing all of this, getting us excited about warm water diving and coming out there to do some surveys.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Ron, I see your question there. The goal is to be we have a ton of surveys to do. And so we don't necessarily cluster them together. We do it when it's available, conditions and volunteer wise. So thank you all so much. Like, I can't thank you enough for allowing me the time and space to just kind of talk through this with you. I'm very excited to see some of you out here. It's a really fun and amazing program. And also too, I'll see maybe some of you doing some kelp surveys again at some point too. So, although I might have had to give up my cold water diver card. So.
Last time you were here, your dry suit was pretty wet, so.
It was. There were some refreshing dives. Yep. All right. Thank you guys all so much. And if you have further questions, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying, thanks, Brad. This is really great talk. And I'm so excited about this project. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And I'd love to maybe, Jackie, if you don't mind, if you have access, and you can send out my contact information to, the people that are on the call. But if you need it, you can find it at reefcheck.org/Hawaii.
Yeah, when I send out the recording, I can add your contact information, so it's easy to find.
Perfect. All right, thank you all.
Everyone.
Happy diving. Aloha.
Bye, everyone.